Hi scholars, I'm so excited to be back reading with you guys again today from our Magic Treehouse text about the Civil War. But part of me is a little bit sad because this is one of the last days we're going to read this book. We only have two chapters left that we're going to read today. We finished chapter 8 yesterday, and in your summaries, you guys told me that chapter 8, Brothers, was about Jack and Annie going back into the field to help different soldiers. They helped a drummer boy named John by giving him ice packs and cold rags to reduce his fever. They learned the importance of the drummer boy in the war and for the soldiers. Even though Jack and Annie wanted John to stay home and not go back out to battle, they knew that he was needed and it was important. So, with knowing that's where we left off, we're going to get started today with chapter 9. Chapter 9 is called Don't Give Up. Annie, said Jack. Over here, she called. Jack saw two figures standing in the twilight. He walked over to Annie and Clara. They all stared in the direction of the distant battlefield. Bright lights flashed against the dark blue horizon, cannon shells exploding. Every time you see a flash, you know a shell may have taken a life or many lives, said Clara. That's awful, said Annie. Yeah, it is, said Clara. A whole world can vanish in a flash. All a young man's joys and sorrows, all his memories. This is a cruel war, said Annie. All wars are cruel, said Clara Barton. People feel they must fight for causes they believe in, but they soon discover that war is not about glory and fame. It's about misery and terrible pain and sadness. It makes me miss my mom and dad, said Annie. It makes me really miss them. Annie sounded tired and homesick. Finally, she had lost her cheerfulness. I think it's time for you two to go home, said Clara. Jack thought of all of the wounded men who needed food and water and kindness and comfort. No, Jack said, we have to stay. We can't give up. That's on the list. Don't give up. Jack pulled out their list to show Clara Barton. Oh, yes, she said, nodding. I see one of my nurses has written down the things I often say. Let me add one thing more. Do not forget the ones who love you. Jack heaved a big sigh. He was homesick too. Wow, Jack has really changed in this story. At the beginning, he was very hesitant and didn't want to go near the sadness or the danger. But now, Jack is here asking to help and kind of wants to stay because he knows how many soldiers there are that need help. Can we keep the list? He asked. Of course, said Clara. You don't have to work in a hospital to follow my words. They work in all of life, no matter where you go. Thanks, said Jack. My thanks to both of you, said Clara Barton. You were great helpers. You're a great teacher, said Annie. Goodbye, said Clara Barton. Be very careful going home. We will, said Jack and Annie. Bye. The sun was setting as they walked out of the camp. The boom of cannon sounded in the distance. Soldiers sang a song around a campfire. We're tenting tonight on the old campground. Give us a song to cheer our weary hearts, a song of home and friends we love so dear. Why do you think the soldiers would be singing, even though there's so much to be sad about at this time of the war? Well, we read for earlier in the text and on part of the list, it said to be cheerful and have hope. So that lets us know these soldiers are singing even though there's so much sadness going on because they want to stay hopeful and they need hope to keep fighting. Jack and Annie walked through the darkening field. By the time they reached the woods, the stars were out. They climbed up the rope ladder to the treehouse. Annie grabbed the Pennsylvania book. Wait, said Jack. He looked out the window. He couldn't see anything below. But the soldier's song still carried through the warm, starry night. As Jack listened, he thought of Clara Barton, the elderly slave, the young Confederate soldier, and John, the drummer boy. War is not a game, Jack said softly. It is definitely not a game. The song ended, the cannon fire stopped. The night was quiet, except for the croaking of frogs. "Ready?" Annie whispered. "Ready," said Jack. "I really wish we could go home," Annie said, pointing to the picture of Frog Creek Woods. The wind started to blow. The treehouse started to spin. It spun faster and faster. Then everything was still. Absolutely still. Scholars, that's the end of chapter 9. They've already left the Civil War and they're going back home. Let's summarize chapter 9 in 3 to 4 sentences. Chapter 9 was called Don't Give Up. So in chapter 9, Don't Give Up, Jack and Annie thought about how horrific the war is and how cruel it really is. Jack and Annie decided to go home. Clara helped them figure out that it was time to go, even though Jack wanted to stay and help. Clara told Jack and Annie to leave, so they went to the treehouse to go home. Now we're in chapter 10. It's called Home Sweet Home. That title lets me know they probably made it safely back home. There was a booming in the distance. Jack opened his eyes and caught his breath. "Is that cannon fire?" he wondered. "Are we still back in the Civil War?" "We're home," said Annie. "Home sweet home." "Oh man," Jack whispered. They were home. They were back in Frog Creek Woods. They were wearing their own comfortable clothes again. The cannon fire was really only thunder. And at that moment, Jack loved the thunder. Raindrops tapped against the treehouse. "We better hurry," said Jack. "Wait, leave the list in the treehouse," said Annie. "It's the first special writing for Morgan's library. Something to follow." Jack took the list of Clara Barton's rules out of his pack. He put it on the floor next to Morgan's letter. "I wonder how that list will help save Camelot," he said. "I don't know," said Annie, "but you know what's weird about getting that list? I think we couldn't have just taken it home when we first got it. We had to live it first." Jack nodded. Annie was completely right, he thought. He picked up his backpack. "Wait, I see another note," said Annie. She picked a piece of paper off the treehouse floor. On it was written, "Come back on Wednesday." "I guess that's when Morgan wants us to look for the next special writing," said Annie. "That's in 3 days," said Jack. "Let's go home and rest." He stared down the rope ladder. He started down the rope ladder. Annie followed. And when they stepped onto the ground, the rain began to pour down. "Run!" said Jack. They ran through the Frog Creek Woods, then down their street. They ran to their porch and dashed into their dry, cozy house. They found their parents reading in the living room. "Mom, Dad," cried Annie, "we're so glad to see you." Why does Annie cry out, "Mom, Dad, we're so glad to see you"? Why do you guys think Annie cries that out? Well, we read about how war was really sad and difficult, and that's where she just was. And Clara had told Annie to remember those who love you in chapter 9. So that makes me think Annie cried out to her parents because she wanted to be home with them and was so relieved to be with the ones that she loved. "Well, we're glad to see you too," their dad said, sounding a little puzzled. "Go put on dry clothes," said their mom. Jack and Annie started up to their rooms. Halfway up the stairs, Jack stopped. "Oh, I have a question," he called to his parents. "Did anyone in our family fight in the Civil War?" Their dad looked surprised. "Yes," he said. "One of your great-great-grandfathers was a drummer boy." "Oh, man," whispered Jack. "What was his name, Dad?" asked Annie. "John," their dad said. Jack and Annie gasped. And what happened to John?" Jack asked. "Was he hurt in the war?" "No, he grew up to be a school teacher," their mom said. "He had 5 children." Jack and Annie were so happy. "That's great news," said Annie. "Really great news," said Jack. "Thanks for telling us." Sure, their dad smiled, though he looked puzzled again. As Jack hurried to his room, some words from the Civil War song ran through his mind. Give us a song to cheer our weary hearts, a song of home. I think Jack and Annie met their great-great-grandfather John, who was the drummer boy they helped. That's so cool. This is the last image we have. And scholars, this is the end of chapter 10. How would you summarize chapter 10? Let's try and do it together, just focusing on the main ideas in 3 to 4 sentences. Chapter 10, Home Sweet Home. Jack and Annie arrived safely home, and they thought a lot about what they'd learned about life in the Civil War. They wanted to rest before their next adventure, and when they got home, they were relieved to be with their mom and dad. And then the author gives us some more information about Clara Barton and drummer boys. I want to share this with you so that we know, because we know that one of our purposes for reading this text was to learn more about Clara Barton. Clara Barton, known as the Angel of the Battlefield, nursed soldiers during the Civil War. She also used her own money to bring them supplies. After the war, she formed a bureau to search for soldiers who were missing as a result of the war. Her work brought information to more than 22,000 families. In 1881, Clara Barton founded the American Red Cross. Her organization not only provides relief during times of war, but also helps people who have suffered terrible natural disasters, such as hurricanes or floods. Now we have information about the drummer boys. It is thought that nearly 60,000 boys served as drummer boys or buglers in the Civil War. One of the youngest drummer boys was Johnny Clem, who enlisted at the age of 7. He was so brave that he was made a sergeant when he was only 13. Wow, I'm so glad that the author included that extra information. We know this wasn't a biography, but we did learn a lot about Clara Barton, who was a real person from the past. And Clara Barton is considered an important historical figure. Even though this isn't a biography, we still got to learn about her. So why do you think Clara Barton is considered an important historical figure? That's what you guys are going to respond to and work on today. You can write your answer out or use the note feature on Seesaw. Make sure you use Clara Barton's name, complete sentences, and you can reference the text to prove and explain why Clara Barton is considered an important historical figure. I loved getting to read this book with you guys and hope that you find other Magic Treehouse books to read.